Welcome to True Crime Boss. I'm Jared Ferrantino, and we are back in the Kohberger world in Idaho and the murders of Kaylee, Maddie, Zaina, and Ethan. Folks, it is a long, slow roll through the pretrial process in Idaho. A lot went on this week, even though it feels like nothing happened. We were expecting to have hearings on the genetic genealogy issue, the discovery issue, where the defense is claiming that the prosecution isn't turning over certain evidence. We expected to hear something on the jury motions and the surveys that the defense is putting out. Everything has now been kicked to May 30th, and we feel like we're just mired down in this slowed process on the slow journey onto the trial in the People versus Bryan Kohberger. I've been there before, ladies and gentlemen. I've had cases that just get bogged down for months and years in this process, in the pretrial process. You have to remember one thing. If this process goes wrong, the trial can't go right. And people have to remember that. And I look at the families as they're waiting for justice here, particularly the Gonsalves family, and they're very outspoken in their criticism about how long this is taking. Believe me, I get that it's taking a long time. But the greatest tragedy would be if they have to try this case more than once. The prosecution has one chance to get it right. And when the defense keeps coming in saying they don't have certain pieces of evidence, they haven't received certain, for example, they're fighting over cell phone tower data, which we've been talking about here on True Crime Boss. The prosecution has not turned over to the defense certain backup information that would be gleaned from those towers. Now, the prosecution isn't being spiteful. They're not being incredible or uncredible in what they're doing. They're saying they don't have all that information at the moment to give to the defense. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a problem to move forward. If the defense not only doesn't have the information, doesn't have the opportunity to have their own cell phone tower experts test that evidence. You can't go to trial if you haven't viewed the evidence against you and haven't had a full and fair opportunity to test that evidence. Now, on that issue, I come down on the side of the defense. Let's try to get that information to them as soon as possible, get these tests done, and get this thing moving to trial. I've been saying for months this trial is not happening until the summer of 2025, and it's starting to shape up that way. I hope we make it and let it happen and allow it to happen in the summer of 2025. But if these delays keep happening, folks, that date looks a little bit less promising as well, because I know what's coming. Once all that evidence is received and tested, who knows what the defense is going to find? But when they find issues, they raise those issues in pretrial motions before the judge, and they slog it out in court with the Commonwealth. They will spend as much, if not more time in court in pretrial litigation than they will in the actual trial itself. In addition to the DNA, or in addition to the phone records issue, there's the genetic genealogy request that the defense has made. They want all this backup data for the labs, all this theory behind the genetic genealogy that was utilized in developing the DNA profile that ultimately led to the discovery of a relative of Bryan Kohberger's matched up with his daddy's DNA from the garbage. That stuff is still happening. They're still having that fight and getting that information. That also causes a delay in moving forward to trial, because they're going to be able, they being the defense, are going to be able to say, our people have not had a full and fair opportunity to test that evidence. And I am purposefully using the word full and fair opportunity. That's a buzzword in the law. When the defense says, we have not had the opportunity to do this, judge, who's a great judge, he's patient, he listens. He is going to have to receive that information and make a very, very big decision. He cannot and would not, I can tell because I watch him struggle with these decisions, move forward if the defense has not had an opportunity to test the DNA or at least review the backup genetic genealogy DNA that he's already ordered has to be turned over. The other issue that's going on right now and maybe coming up on that May 30th hearing is the issue of these surveys that the defense has sent out. I'm sure many of you out there have heard the defense attorneys have sent out surveys to the people of Latah County, and they've asked them to provide information or whether or not they have preconceived notions about the guilt or innocence of Bryan Kohberger and certain aspects of the case. Now, that is a unique situation where a defense team sends out surveys and presents them in court and says, Judge, this pool of prospective jurors is so tainted, as supported by our polling data, we cannot have a fair and impartial jury impaneled here. We need to move this trial. And I've said before, you can't have this trial on Mars without people having preconceived notions. However, knowing about a case, having some preconceived notions alone is not the standard with which you can judge if a jury can be seated in a particular case. The real standard is your opinion so fixed that you wouldn't consider the evidence presented by either side in fairly assessing the guilt or innocence of the accused? And in this case, there's no survey that can really get your arms around that particular question. I've seen surveys that jurors fill out the morning they arrive in that courtroom. When you start to ask them about the particular questions in that survey, they either don't remember answering particular questions a certain way, they didn't understand questions a certain way, they were distracted, nervous. The only way, and I wouldn't say the only way, the best way to assess whether or not a jury or a prospective juror will be fair and impartial is a personal conversation. Put them on the stand and have that conversation. Are you in a position where you can assess the evidence against the accused in this case, or have you seen so much that it's just impossible for you to consider anything other than Bryan Kohberger's guilty, or I think he's being framed? I did want to talk a little bit about the commenters and the folks that are DMing me about Bryan Kohberger being framed. And I got to tell you, folks, you got to get your arms around this thing, whatever's going on in your life, and look at the evidence. It is my experience that the simplest explanation and where all the evidence in particular points is usually the explanation for a particular killing. I love the fact that we're engaged, and I enjoy talking back and forth with some of you, but I'm trying to keep an open mind here. I don't know where some of this frame up stuff is coming from. Continue to let me know. I mean, I enjoy your commentary, but back it up with a little bit more than this is a setup, okay? Because how you end up with video footage of a white car and the DNA of a particular person that matches a person nearby that has that car with that cell phone acting strange is either a hell of a coincidence or the greatest setup in the history of setups. So let's keep the conversation going, but keep it real. I'm trying to keep it real on our end, and definitely I enjoy your comments and welcome them. But it is a long road to justice. It's a long road to trial. I promise you, everybody's working hard on both sides to do this the right way. I think the defense is doing the right thing. I do not think these are delay tactics on their part. If they legitimately don't have certain pieces of evidence, that's got to be addressed. The jury issue, I think the judge would be right to wait and see if we can get a jury in Latah County. If they strike out, you move it then, because it's going to be tough to seat a jury anywhere, that find jurors anywhere that don't have sufficient knowledge of this case. The DNA information, turn it over as soon as you can, prosecution. If you feel confident in that DNA, there's nothing to hide from. We're going to continue to cover this case. This one has our full attention, folks. If you get a chance, I had the opportunity to be featured on Crime Nation with the CW. It's on demand. It's on their app. We really, really take apart the Kohberger case and have some really exciting projects coming up on True Crime Television. And check us out. We are regulars on Nancy Grace and really enjoyed doing that. Had a great conversation with our friend Lauren Conlon just last week. We talked about Karen Reed, Kohberger, and everything true crime. If you get a chance, please support our friends and check them out.